All right, welcome to another episode of The Brown Perspective. This is your host, Romero, and I'm here with my co-host, Eduardo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Ajá, papi, ¿qué? Todo bien por aquí, activado.
You better be careful with that, man. Are you sure you're a friendly that can talk like that?
Ajá, papi. No, yo estoy hablando, I'm talking like someone from la costa de Colombia. Que,
Oh,
ajá, papi,
really?
¿qué? Ajá,
I
entonces
hmm.
ellos tienen un acento más distintivo, como, bueno, como todo, muchas partes de Colombia.
I thought you
Pero
I thought you were doing it in solidarity with the gay community because of the, the Supreme
of
Court
the,
decision.
yes, queen, yes. It was a big week. But I think if you like humor, you like imitating people, you do have to be able to do some accents. And I just love the yas because it kind of, in my point, it was both like uh like a gay lesbian, more related to transgender. So it was like the transgender persona and then the Latino accent, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
saying yes, you say yas. So it's like yas. So I just fucking love it.
Yeah, it was sounded a little bit like the stereotypical way that people imitate gay guys,
Hmm.
especially here in LA, and it, it, imitating gay guys is you get into that gray area where it's the same thing as telling jokes about black people or telling
Well,
jokes about another culture because they can do it. Like black people can tell jokes
that's
about
true.
themselves all the time, and gay people, I'm sure, can mock each other. I don't know how they feel about non-gay people, so that's why I was saying, you
That's
know,
true. No, it's a good point. But it is funny because it also brings up the question of like how people make fun of white girls and white girls' accents. So here in LA, obviously it's the Valley girl,
the
like, oh
valley,
my God,
yeah.
girl, like let's go shopping and doing all these things. So, but yeah, you do bring up a good point about the sensitivities around that.
Yeah, yeah. Look, from my point of view, if it's comedy, it should be, as long as you're dishing it out proportionally to everyone, then it
Yeah,
should be good. But again, that's, you've seen all the comedians that have gotten in trouble because they don't know how to walk that tight, that balance between being funny and not offending a certain group. Even Dave Chappelle gets in trouble all the time.
well, Kevin
So
Hart too.
yeah,
I know. Well, even Trevor Noah. And actually, all of them. Well, at least wasn't Trevor Noah and Kevin Hart. At least it was for making homophobic remarks or
they had made, at least Kevin Hart, I know, made some on Twitter
yeah,
like 10 years ago, and then somebody found them, somebody unearthed those tweets and called him out on it, and he did apologize, but it was one of those things that would not go away. So
that's true.
it's a tough time to be a comedian because mm, yeah,
Well, you have to be able. You have to be an equal offender,
yes, first of all, you
and
have
and,
you have to
and you
start
also have to
there.
be smart about it. I mean, you also have to, yeah, because it is offending, right? So I think that's what humor does, and I think some of the great comedians can make fun of you. Like those are the people that can like tear you apart, just make fun of your appearance or how you dress, who can, and I think a lot of comedy is that. Like when you do stand up, you're supposed to interact with the crowd. You're supposed to be able to bring him into the act, right? And every once in a while reference that case. But yeah, but there's a fine line on when you are, when you go too far and how
uh,
far are you willing to go
yeah,
and whether or not somebody captures it on tape and you
well, yeah,
become
Dave Ch-
infamous.
Dave Chappelle said it best that it's funny because it as long as it's always at somebody else's expense, it's not as
Hmm.
funny when it's at yours, and that's usually the sentiment. But it's I can sympathize with comedians because it really is tough. As long as a comedian is speaking to power,
Hmm.
making fun of those that are in power, then I think in general, people seem to be okay with that. That's why this is what a lot of people don't understand about making fun of white people, of white men. That that's the group that's in power. That's usually how comedy works. It pokes at those at the top, but when
Yeah.
comedy starts poking those at the bottom, and it feels like it feels disproportionate, even if you're doing one to one, or even if the proportion is actually correct. It might feel disproportionate just because of the actual reality that some groups are able to just shake that off because they're in
And if you're
power
not from
anyway.
that community either, right?
Exactly. So that's why I think Chappelle gets in trouble when he talks about the transgender community, because this is a community that, of all the subgroups, of all of those that are discriminated against, they're the ones that seem to have it the worst. You pick any
Yeah.
group that's at a disadvantage, and look at the transgender community, look at the suicide rates, look at all of the other problems that they have, and
Hmm.
then for comedians to make fun of them, and for it to start feeling like the comedian is on it, and doesn't move on to other things. Like with Dave Chappelle,
Yeah.
it at some point it started feeling like he was focusing a little too much on that, but he
Hmm.
wasn't doing it intentional. The Chappelle started focusing on that community because of the reaction from the very first time that he mentioned it. Whereas in
Hmm.
that first comedy set, he may have been proportionally dishing it out because this community gave him a bigger reaction. He started talking more about that. And
Hmm.
so it's a tricky one. I
It,
don't go ahead.
no, it's true, but in a couple of things. One, so they say imitation is the highest form of flattery. So in some respects, being imitated and kind of becoming part of the conversation is also a recognition. So I think that's the other piece. Like I feel like what comedians do, they make something that is um, topics. They make topics that you're not supposed to talk about. They make them funny. And obviously, when you get into the political topics, you have to be, it takes a lot more skills when you talk about politics, racial. It takes like a Trevor Noah, Dave Chappelle, um, Tiffany Haddish realizing that we're also living out some of the great female comedian voices.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but in some ways, like being able to talk about it and laugh about it is an acknowledgement, and it's also a way to kind of make progress and help educate people and make people think a little bit. And and you have a right point that I think it also representation is important, and it's important to have those voices being able to be on stage, tell the stories, sort of make fun of themselves, but also be able to tell the other things about their stories and their experiences that they don't get to tell because they don't have the same access and the same platforms because of the discrimination that you just were
Yeah.
mentioning.
Yeah, and you could, yeah, well, that's one way of looking at it, that the exposure, just the fact that Chappelle is talking about it, and it that generates controversy, that in itself is, in a way, could be good just because of the attention, even though it also highlights if the community feels like they're being singled out unfairly, and if they don't appreciate that type of comedy. But then again, there's also perception versus reality, where uh, Chappelle himself said this, that there's members from the transgender community that are okay with this comedy. That they're some of his biggest supporters. And
Hmm.
so you have this very active small group of individuals that drive the conversation in social media. And because nobody wants to be seen as the group or the person that doesn't side with a group that is a marginalized group, then it becomes like an echo chamber where everyone else starts supporting that. But in reality, it may have just been a small percentage of people that spoke up, and spoke up very loudly on social media, and they have influence. That it gives you the impression that the entire community is against that. Whereas in reality, maybe most, I don't have numbers, and I think this is a problem that we get into with a lot of conversations. We just don't have the breakdown of what percentage of from the transgender community, what's the percentage that is okay with the comedy, and what's the percentage that is not, right? If we had those numbers, then it would at least inform our conversations a lot more. All we can really do is speculate. So
But even then, I think then you get into the question of why would somebody think that that kind of joke is funny and it's okay. So I think it also kind of gets into the more deeper roots. Like, is it because, your mind has been colonized, you have a different perspective, right? So like, do you think that's funny because you agree with the either the mainstream view, or you simply don't understand why that can be detrimental? So I think there could also be a little bit of that too, getting at the who sets the narrative. and who sets and who kind of dictates whether that's a funny thing or not. So
Yeah, it's again a lot of different variables, and I'm glad that you mentioned who sets the narrative, and kind of you switched us, or it's a good transition to what we want to talk about today, which is the Supreme Court decision
mhm.
specifically, and I'll move on to here. We want to talk about the Supreme Court decision as well as because there were two big decisions, the one for the LGBTQ community and the other one for the Dream Act. But
Mhm.
since we're on the topic, let's go with the Supreme Court decision. So it's this one. This one's from NPR. Let me just read briefly this paragraph here. In a historic decision, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Monday that the 1964 Civil Rights Act protects gay, lesbian, and transgender employees from discrimination based on sex. The ruling was 6-3, with Justice Neil Gorsuch, President Trump's first appointee to the court, writing the majority opinion. The opinion was joined by Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's four liberal justices. So, what was your take on this decision?
Well, my take was huge because given the fact that Roberts and Gorsuch are conservative, I think the expectation was that this was going to be a blow to the LGBTQ community. But the fact that Roberts, as a chief of staff, not I'm sorry, chief of staff, chief justice, sided with the majority and wrote the opinion, that sends a big signal that that's an important issue to him, important enough that he wanted to make sure that he sort of set the narrative, the legal understanding, and the precedent of that decision. And the fact that it was 6-3, and the fact that they sort of went against um, President Trump and the administration is a huge thing, right? So a huge statement. So it's a statement that gave a lot of people hope because it sort of showed that they were able to get above party in order to safeguard an important human right that had been won.
Yeah,
That and then just to connect it to the current moment, that was won by African Americans back in 1964 as a result of a lot of the protests and manifestations, similar to what we see now. So we're living in that similar moment. So it very historically too connected the historical struggle of the LGBTQ community to that of African Americans, which is obviously connected to that of Latinos, Natives, Asians, and so others. So it kind of just gives this amazing. I don't know. I think one of the reasons why it's so important, and because you kind of feel that okay, uh, LGBT, there's still a lot of stuff that's going on, but I think these rights are here to stay at least for the foreseeable future.
yeah, and 6-3 is it doesn't seem very common.
Mm-mm.
And these justices usually it's one that sides either with the more liberal or the conservative sides. One usually jumps the aisle, but in this case you had two.
Yeah, Supreme Court decisions are like soccer games. Slow scoring, but thrilling,
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, I'm thinking here. This paragraph right here. Two involved employees who sued after contending they had been fired because they were gay. What kind of businesses are out there? Do you think that were still doing this? Because even though the decision makes it now illegal to discriminate based on this, there were a lot of companies that were already not discriminating
Hmm.
against this. They just I don't think it was as progressive as someone being out there and being gay and the company embracing them. It was more like, yeah, we don't ask, we don't really care, right? If you get your work done, then that's all that matters. But what
Hmm.
kind of do you think there's a specific type of a specific sector where they experience the most discrimination?
Oh, I think it's probably
Finance.
across the board. I think it's you probably don't see a lot of gay, transgender people in corporate boardrooms in high political offices. So yes, I think some businesses are probably progressive as it relates to the policies, but there's still a lot of discrimination, and there's also a lot of other businesses who, because of their faith, because they may see being gay, transgender,
Mm-hmm.
through their religious lens that they completely through their religious and moral lens that they completely they may not say they don't discriminate, but then they're not going to hire or they're not going to promote, they don't have a culture where somebody can be themselves, which is
Yeah,
a problem.
that's what I was getting at. That is the it feels like the states that are more conservative, more uh, closely aligned with religion, and then the communities or the employers that have some connection to the religion. That's where you would think you would find this discrimination the most. And in a way, I think what this might be is the rest of the nation. It's going to force the rest of the nation to catch up with where other more progressive states were already in, like the state. I'm not saying that like here in California there wasn't discrimination, but I would think that some southern or midwestern state with a lot of companies that are closely aligned with the church, that's where you would see the most discrimination. For,
Hmm.
at least look here in LA in Santa Monica, the company where I work, this must have been like 4 years ago. One of the one of the top guys in our networking slash IT department. So everyone knew that he was gay,
It was in the
and
closet or what?
um,
Or he just didn't. He just shared with people who he trusted.
yeah, I think yeah he wasn't like fully open about it, but there were a few people that had intimate knowledge and they knew, and I never really paid much attention, but once somebody told me, it made sense because I started thinking back on emails or communications where he had referred to his significant other as his partner. Like he never
Hmm.
said my wife; it was like partner, and there were other little things. But this
Hmm.
was an African American guy, African
Wow.
American, gay, and when this news, it didn't even. It's not even like the news swept through the company and all of a sudden it was like this big hot gossip. It was like at some point someone mentioned it and I was like, oh, okay, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Didn't know, but hey, cool.
You
And
were
now,
like, you didn't know? I knew. I knew from day one.
yeah, so I didn't. So that's why I'm saying that some companies were already a little bit more progressive when it comes to this. But I'm glad that now it's officially a law because it is pretty ridiculous that people based on their sexual orientation were still being discriminated against. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah. And then we have good old Trump. Why don't you summarize that for us?
No, yeah. So I think in the week before on Friday, actually, the Trump administration had put a ruling to say or a regulation that was going to really roll back some of the health protections for transgender people that were enacted during the Obama administration. So that's the interesting thing that while the Trump administration was getting ready to announce this on Friday, the following Monday, the Supreme Court decision comes out. So it sort of shows that yes, I mean the administration is getting ready to do something that is not right, and the fact that the Supreme Court just ruled that you cannot discriminate against gay or transgender people at work, that means that now there's a stronger legal basis to fight back these healthcare rules. So reality is that the administration may move forward in implementing those rules. There's going to be a legal challenge, and then because of the decision that the Supreme Court um, indicated this week, there's a good chance that you're going to get a decision close to that 6-3 or at
Mm-hmm.
least 4-5 because that's the thing. It sets a precedent, and the concept of stare decisis, you know, the decision stays in Latin is as an important precedent. So that's why legal precedent is so important as it relates to these cultural and legal wars that we're in the middle of.
Yeah, this paragraph is interesting. They're saying healthcare is different with regards to sex and your own personal identity. Well, let me read this other paragraph beforehand because I think it's also important. I was just skimming through this right now. Here. The Trump healthcare rule rests on the idea that sex is determined by biology, whereas the Obama version relied on a broader understanding shaped by a person's inner sense of being male, female, neither, or a combination. And so, based on that, here, what I'm getting from this is that they're saying they're trying to separate the Supreme Court decision that gives protections when it comes to employers versus healthcare, because they're saying healthcare is different. The binary biological character of sex, which is ultimately grounded in genetics, takes on a special importance in the health context, administrative lawyers wrote. Those implications might not be fully addressed by future job discrimination rulings, even if courts were to deem the categories of sexual orientation or gender identity to be encompassed by the prohibition on sex discrimination in civil rights law. This one says, I don't think it works very well. Justice Green's opinion, he's not saying the word sex, it's ambiguous. So anyways, yeah, so they're trying to make this distinction about biological difference, whether when you're born, your biology determines your sex, or if it's more based on your inner identity of how you feel. And by the way, what I'm trying to get from this article is I'm trying to get the actual protections that were rolled back. Oh, here. So one of them is barring sex discrimination in healthcare. The Obama-era rule was intended to carry out anti-discrimination provisions in former president's signature healthcare law, which included a provision that barred sex discrimination in healthcare. So that's really interesting. So you can no longer discriminate. An employer can't discriminate, but if Trump successfully rolls this back, there will be discrimination in healthcare. What does that look like? That means doctors get to choose. They get to say that they don't want to provide treatment or services for someone that is considered transsexual or gay.
That's one. The other big one is insurance companies are not going to cover healthcare related to that person that may be related to a sex transition operation or something like that, right? So I think there's also like policy and economic things that would impact that person's health, similar to what happens with abortion, right? Like how they try to limit abortion, the legal right to abortion, through a number of other means.
Yeah, and this is important as here as well. Another provision of the Obama rule bars discrimination in healthcare against women on grounds of having or not having abortions. The Trump rule overturns that as well. So in one swoop, he's targeting the LGBTQ community as well as women. And so going back to the discrimination, so the insurance companies would be able to reject sex change operations or coverage for sex change operations. I mean, look, wouldn't they already reject that anyway? I mean, insurance companies are pretty good at denying payment for a lot of things. I'm sure they would try to find justification for not paying for somebody's sex change. They would deem that as because they always have these classifications. They would say, well, that's an elective, that's more cosmetic. It wasn't required. I suppose that's the fine line between. I suppose that's where the protections came in to not let insurance companies wiggle their way out of paying for these things.
Yeah, and I think I probably stand corrected. It was probably not for the operation to do the transition itself, and maybe like some of the associated or post-operation costs too. Because I think you're right. I think there's some elective procedures that people choose to do.
No, but even the operation itself, look, you can make a really good case that that's needed.
Well, yeah, but if it's needed, but can you pay for it? And should your insurance pay for it, or you can have your sex change. You just have to have a lot of money.
No. But I'm saying is that in theory you could. It's conceivable to argue that a sex change operation is essential to be covered by insurance, the same way that something that insurance would have to cover something like a yearly physical, or you being sick and needing hospitalization. You could make the case on the grounds that if a person is born, biologically they were born with the organs of a man, but they feel like they're a woman, and that in a sense that internal conflict leads to depression or not being accepted or not, there's a lot of different consequences of feeling trapped in a body. That if you feel like you're a woman but you're trapped in a man's body, that has a lot of repercussions, to the point where it could lead again to things like depression and all these other negative consequences of it. So you could make the case that if you are one of those individuals and you do feel like ultimately you belong in the body of a woman, then that operation is essential to you, right? Whether everybody else thinks it's not, then that's very subjective. But to the person that needs it, if that's their reality, then it feels like it. I would think that it feels to them, it feels like it's pretty essential.
No, yeah, and you bring a good point. I always appreciate how you can bring a perspective not lived that not a lot of us can kind of connect to, but it's true because then it becomes like I think that's one of the things that transgender and sex, because for some people they think that is a choice, right?
Yeah.
You choose to be gay, you choose to be lesbian, or you choose to change your sex. And one thing, like throughout history and naturally, biologically, there are people who oftentimes are born with both genders, genitalia from both, they're hermaphrodites. They have qualities and parts from both genders, or maybe one gender doesn't form completely, and then they have to have that removed, or what have you, to the point that you made that they could be a man and both feel like they're a woman and they're trapped in a man's body. But it kind of brings this thing of choice. But to your point, like imagine having to like decide whether or not you're gay, right? Like, am I really gay? And then to say, oh, I'm a guy and I want to turn myself into a woman, and I feel so strongly about that I'm willing to go through that pain and through that through that traumatic change in order to change my physical appearance. I imagine how much you must believe that that's what you want to do.
Well, also just think about the consequences even within a family. If you're born with the physical characteristics of a man, but your attitude is very feminine. You speak like a woman. You carry yourself like a woman. You prefer all the things that women do. Imagine the alienation within a family that an individual will experience as a result of that. I mean, there's no wonder why the what is it, the suicide rate is the highest among that group.
Yeah, you stand out. You stand
Yeah.
out, right? There's no way you cannot stand out. But hopefully people embrace you, right? And that's the unfortunate thing that even when your own family doesn't embrace you, that I think that's what leads to that the type of suicides and the type of desperation that comes from that. And that's a thing. Like imagine not feeling loved by your parents just because you look one way, or your ability is another. Like it must be such a devastating blow as a person, as a human being, not to be loved and accepted by those who are closest to you, including your mom and your dad.
Yeah, well, I would think that would be one of the primary reasons why they run away from home, and a lot of them end up homeless. Also, if they don't have a support network, others to help them out, and so yeah, it could be, yeah, like I said, it's I think it's quite difficult, and but in the going back to this right here, because I keep going back to this sentence just because look, this is actually really tricky. Like everything that I explained or everything that I said regarding how an individual may feel if they were born with the physical characteristics of a man but feel like they really belong, that they really are a woman, that's somebody's reality. That's how they feel, so it's real to them. But at some level, you have to ask yourself, when you say you feel like a woman, like what does that really mean? For example, me as a man, as much as I want to say that I empathize and I know what a woman feels, I have no clue. I don't know what a woman feels like. So let's say you're born with the physical characteristics of a man, and then you feel like you're a woman, and you want to have a sex change operation because you're saying that you're a woman, but do you really know what a woman feels like? Because you might be you might have some idea in your head of what it is to be a woman, but is that what, right? It's really weird. Like, how do you know that there's no difference between someone that's born with the characteristics of a woman, with the organs and everything else that goes along with it, how do you know that's exactly how you feel? You might be feeling like a variation of that. It might not be the same,
Hmm.
but who's to say? Like, you would have to. I mean, look, you could ask 1,000 women, hey, what does it feel like to be a woman? It's like they would tell you all these things, and you would say, oh, okay, that's how I feel. But at the biological level, all the chemical processes that are going on, would they be similar between these two, between these 1,000 women, and then the one that was born with the body of a man, but then feels like a woman? Are those things? Is it truly fully the same? I ask myself that question sometimes.
That's an interesting question. I don't know, right? It's hard. I think they may or they may not, right? And it just depends on, because even if, you know, being a woman, there's a lot that connects women and men. And I feel we think, do, and act very similarly, let's say like 90% of the time. And there's maybe about 10% that is different because of biology, because of chemistry, because just a different experience. And again, this is just very general, talking in general terms, but I think there's a lot of overlap between the genders and the sexes. But then, yeah, to get into that point, like, and I don't know if it's because then it's like not only because one, I think it starts with I feel attracted to a man. Okay, I feel attracted to a man, but I can still be a man and I'm comfortable in my male body. So it's another level, right? So like I'm attracted to men, or I guess you can also be attracted to women, right? So you could be.
But just to throw another little wrench in there,
Uh,
there's a lot of times when normal men have attraction to other men.
mhm,
It may not be a sexual attraction, or it may not get to that level, but there's certainly an attraction. Like,
yeah.
look at guys when they usually have preferences for the
Hmm.
type of buddies that they like to hang out with,
Yeah.
specifically like other men. That's an attraction.
Hmm.
There's an attraction to someone if you're in a group. If someone is a leader in that group, there's an attraction there. You feel there's feelings there for them when if
Hmm.
you're in battle and your buddy gets shot. You feel a connection. You feel love for that other
Hmm.
person.
And
So
friendship and all that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly. So it may not be of a sexual nature, but like that I suppose that's the overlap that you're talking about, because women also feel this about other women.
Hmm.
But just because it's not sexual in nature doesn't mean there's no attraction. And sometimes that boundary between just a regular attraction of hanging out with your buddies because they're your buddies, and it jumping over to a sexual nature, it's hard to say. If, like, maybe some people cross that and then just come back and they never follow their what they really feel. Maybe they just
Yeah.
come back.
And yeah, and for me, it's like for me, like I have a difficult time making decisions at time. So like just to make the decision, right? To be able to say, you know what, like this is what I like, this is who I am. I think it also takes a good sense of self-awareness, reflection, and introspection to say, this is how I feel, and this is the type of lifestyle person I want to be. And I feel so strongly about it that I'm going to pursue that, even if I know it's not going to be an easy road, right? I'm going to be discriminated against. I'm going to be um, laughed at. I could be potentially killed. Uh, but this is who I am, and this is how strongly I feel about it. So I think there's a lot to admire in the courage that it takes to make that type of. And again, it's a choice, right? But it is a choice because like they're so committed to being true to themselves that they decide to follow their true lifestyle, right? Which I think is something that it's to be admired, to be that committed to to pursuing your happiness.
Yeah, definitely. And let's do just a quick thought exercise. What do you think would be the percentage of men that would act out on their at any given time their desire to engage in something of a sexual relationship with another man if the following things did not exist: the pressure from the religious community, or even within the family, the religious aspect of a family, the pressure and the stigma that you would receive if they found out that you did that. Also, maybe becoming an outcast, and the self shame that you would feel because of all the things that you've been conditioned to believe based on culture and religion. If that wasn't there, if that pressure wasn't there, right? If there were absolutely no consequences to having some type of sexual relationship with another man or somebody of your same gender, and I'm using the word gender here just to describe in the traditional sense of men and women.
Yeah.
So if you're a man and you act out on your desire to be with another man, even if it's just because you're curious and you want to try it out, if you knew that there were no consequences, how many men out there do you think would actually try that? Because I think that number would be really high. Well, I don't know how high, but definitely more than the ones that actually follow through with that.
I would agree with you. I think at least 40 to 50%, if not more.
That means you're at 50%. That means either me or you would act out.
So there's a chance.
Uh-oh, shit.
So I know we gotta be comfortable with our sexuality.
I know, I'm just kidding.
But it's funny because then you also have, like, when you think of some of the toughest places and toughest guys, like when you think of prison, right? In prison, they are sort of and I'm sorry I don't have like the vocabulary to talk about this, but like, there is sex between men, and there's obviously men who are gay or transgender, and there's others who are not gay and still have sex with other men because of their circumstances, right? I don't know, right? So to your point, they're dealing with the trauma of being in jail, and then with everything else that goes in social places. So yeah, so it's interesting because that does happen, right? There are men who are having men sex with other men who say that they're not gay, and maybe they're not. Maybe they just wanted to explore and see what that would feel like.
Well,
And
that sexual impulse, especially in men, and this is something that maybe women are not able to identify with because they don't have that. But that impulse as a man to have sex, considering that men think about sex, well, how often, like 24/7,
all day.
all day, and like every little thing makes them think about sex. And so yeah, I can imagine how difficult it is for men that are in prison, stuck there knowing that they're going to be there for 20, 30 years, maybe life. The amount of compartmentalizing that they must do in order to be okay with having sex, and not and in a way fight all of the stigmas of society. Again, because if we didn't have these stigmas, if we were like some of those Native American cultures where it was okay to be one or the other, or to choose whatever you wanted to, then maybe they wouldn't feel as conflicted. They wouldn't have to put up these like mental barriers to say, well, I had sex with this other person, but that's because I'm in jail. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, dude, go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, just the type of rationalization that must happen with the one that you mentioned, which is men that have sex with other men but still don't feel like they're gay. They must be saying, well, I'm in prison and I have this sexual need that I need to satisfy, and these guys are just objects to me, and I'm just pleasuring myself with them because I need to, because I have this, it's part of my biology, but
I have no other options.
Yeah, exactly, but that doesn't make me gay, right? So they have to go through that whole rationalization, whereas others are just more okay with saying, well, maybe I did like men after all. So what? Maybe I do like men while I'm in jail. When I come back out, maybe I'll like women again. It's so, this is when people start talking about like that human beings have to be a certain way. This is where I start just wondering, like, well, how do you know about our genetics? We know so little. And for people to say, well, no, if you're born this way, then this is how you must be, and if you're born this other way, this is how you must be. It's totally ludicrous. It's just society accepts certain things, or they encourage certain things because I suppose they're afraid that if women and men are not getting married and forming stable families and having kids, I guess they're afraid that society is somehow going to disintegrate or something, right? If you have like just men partnering up with other men and women partnering up with other women. They're just afraid of all these other things, and that's why they impose um, these lifestyles, and they try to impose these lifestyles on other people.
Yeah, but it's funny because like this conversations make me think of like the Roman times, right? And
Hmm.
when you think about Romans and the famous Roman orgies and things like that, I think they were certainly they had their gods, but I think they had a very different view of sexuality and sex and all those things. So I think in a Roman society, like that context would be like, okay, like the leap from having sex with a bunch of people at the same time and seeing other naked men and stuff like that. I think I can see um, easier leap. And I think it wasn't just the Romans. I think it was the Greeks and some of the other um, sort of those societies that are venerated because of their philosophy and their accomplishments were also very much open
The boy
uh,
lovers.
about sex and things like that. What?
Yeah, well, they were also pedophiles. Well, maybe not back
Yeah.
then because they didn't have laws protecting minors, but technically those were pedophiles.
Yeah, there
Some
were
a lot.
definitely no protections either. So, but but just that it brings that interesting concept of society and what's acceptable and what's not. And I think, some may argue that maybe some of that, to the point that you made, that maybe it was some of those behaviors, some of the things that led to the downfall of the culture of the empire. But maybe it wasn't, right? Maybe it was just the reality that there were politics and other circumstances that changed the future of the Roman Empire
Oh yeah,
and what
yeah.
ended up happening with them.
I
So
don't. I mean, that sounds like something a religious person would try to pin on the decline of the
yeah,
Roman Empire. That oh, they had all these like gay people, and that's so simple. The Roman Empire just it ran through its course, and it ran through the course of victory on the fields, accumulation of land, resources, and slaves, and then probably a period where stability, where they had a lot of wealth, and then
mhm.
corruption started to get out of hand, and then it went through a different phase, and ultimately the final phase of an empire, which is just it disintegrates because it was stretched too thin, too many wars, too much corruption. I would imagine that a lot of empires run that type of
Enemies
course.
coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So just to attribute it to just the fact that they liked having sex with each other, like men with men and women with women, is ridiculous. I doubt that has anything to do with it. Um, so yeah, well, let's. I'd like to switch to the Dream Act for a bit. Unless is there something else that you want to touch on regarding this Supreme Court ruling and the rollback of Trump's healthcare protections?
No, I think we covered it all.
Okay,
Well, a good portion of it.
yeah, and I don't think I need to say this, but just to put it out there that look, these discussions that we have, we're trying to be as honest as we can possibly be with ourselves without like fully judging other people. So the discussion about how men really feel and all these things, that's just what it is. It's a discussion. I think men should feel comfortable having these discussions and asking these
Hmm.
questions because there's nothing wrong with it. Like, look, if you're a man, if you're a guy and your sexual preference is females, like in my case, right, then I should have no problem thinking about all these other scenarios and hypotheticals and it's like what if, and because it doesn't make you anything, it just makes you trying to learn more about yourself and about us in general. So I hope people uh, don't take that conversation that we had the wrong way. It's just an exploration of the dynamics that we have.
Need to have an open mind.
Yeah, reminds me of one time where my buddy and I we went to see a boxing match. Ponce de Leon. He was this Mexican boxer. He was fighting here out of in Maywood. It was like yeah, $35 for the entrance and everything. So we got there and the undercards are playing and we went to get in line to get some beer. And my friend, one of my buddies from high school, he got in line and I guess he got a little too close to the guy that was in front of him. I don't know why. And then the guy turned around and he's like, "Hey man, back off a little bit. You're too close to me." So I suppose my buddy he didn't take that reaction very well. So instead of
Mm.
just moving back a little bit, he started poking at it. So
Oh,
he stayed there and he was like, "Hey man, I'm comfortable with my sexuality. I don't know what your problem is." Yeah, I was like, "Oh fuck, this this guy's gonna
Then the
start a
blows start growing or what? They start fighting?
Yeah, I think the guy I think he puffed up his chest and said a few things, but ultimately didn't lead to anything. Like fortunately, right? But
Yeah.
it's just you never know when you're gonna trigger someone like that. Like look, I don't think my buddy was even that close, but I've been at the airport waiting to get on an airplane, and this woman was literally breathing on my neck once. And then I turned around. What the fuck? And so I did move a little bit because I just thought like, oh, this person has no concept of like social space, right? And but my buddy wasn't even that close. He was like maybe what's a reasonable distance, like 12 inches or 24 inches. I think he was like,
Was a few inches among friends.
anyway, just reminded me of that. All right, let's switch to the Dream Act because that was another major decision this week. So the Supreme Court ruled that it was within Trump's power to roll it back, but the approach that he took, like he didn't follow the process to try to do
Yeah.
it the right way, so that's why they turned it down. And so I mean, Trump said he was going to challenge it and he's going to try to resubmit, but given how long this process takes, my guess is that there wouldn't be a decision even if he tries to resubmit. There wouldn't be a decision before the election, which means that if he's not elected, then essentially this thing, I don't think nothing happens with this thing. So, but if he gets reelected, I don't know if he tries again, or maybe this is one of those battles where maybe he did it and he didn't really care if he would win or lose. Because now what he could do is he could go to his base and say, look, I try to do the right thing. I try to roll back these protections for immigrants, right? The way that he labels them. He could say, I try to do the right thing, but the Supreme Court rejected it. It's not my fault. So he doesn't
Yep.
lose anything with his voters. So because of that same reason, though, he may not even be compelled to try to try to pursue this because he already tried and it already gives him some credit that he tried and he was shut down by the Supreme Court. And so considering how Trump is, that he just cares about himself and about winning the election, he may not even pursue this again. What do you think?
Yeah, you definitely bring a good point, but if we've learned anything about 45 is that he doesn't like to back down. So I think he's gonna back down on this and continue to pursue it because regardless, even if it's not successful, at least this decision was definitely closer than the previous decision that we discussed. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a little more, it's not as clear cut, right? And I think it's just a good political way for him to keep his base riled up, right? It's like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to, because one thing that people need to remember about Trump, he's not only like trying to take away DACA and trying to deport people, not letting people follow the legal process to request refugee status, but he's also reducing the legal immigration. So he's tackling legal immigration. Not only that, now he's also proposing making the system really based on merit as opposed to as family as it had previously done. Because let's face it, if you're rich and you quote unquote have merit, it's easy for you to get an American visa. It's easy for you to get a visa by just agreeing to invest a few $1,000s, a few $100,000 on something. So, this is squarely aimed at immigrants from poor countries, from communities of color, whether Latin America, Africa, Asia, and other parts around the world. So,
But understanding this legal system from the point of view of someone from Mexico, to me it seems like it was already something like this. He must be making it even tougher now because in Mexico right now, if you want to apply for a visa, you need to have wealth, you need to have land, you need to have savings. Otherwise, they
yeah.
won't even consider you.
Yeah,
You-
unless you have a family, unless you have a relative. So that's the thing. Like I think that's one of the fears that if the 11 to 12 million people right now, maybe 11 or maybe a little less, because people might have left because of a number of other reasons. But if all those people were to quote unquote get amnesty or adjust their status, that would mean that it would open the door for those people to eventually bring their relatives or additional people in. Probably it may happen, but to happen to the extent that they fear,
But
it probably won't.
I don't think
But
he
these
can. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think most of these folks are already here. They have ties here. They have other family here. So it's just a matter of the system catching up with the reality of where the country is.
Are you talking about him limiting the ability of a U.S. citizen to petition for his or her relatives in another country?
So I think he's going to limit the well, no, I think he's first they're tackling the access, right? So having legal migration. I think an American citizen probably won't. But if you think about it, if you reduce the number of people coming from outside of the country who are legally, who can have a green card, who can then become citizen, who can then petition for their family, that's going to start limiting the number of American citizens who want to do that because for the most part, American citizens already have their families here, have the ability to go back and forth, etc. So I think they're trying to ultimately reduce the number of American citizens who can petition for relatives or who could have strong ties to other countries.
Well, if he did that, he would also be affecting regular white Americans who end up in situations where they end up having kids outside of this country and then they have to petition for them. So that's what I'm saying
Yeah.
that would be tricky.
And
Um,
maybe at that point they'll continue to be more vocal and active and help change the system.
well, if he's trying to reduce the immigrant quota, which I think that's what you mentioned earlier, which he has
Yeah.
been doing, right? Reducing the immigrant quota. All he's doing is hurting businesses because it's businesses that bring in, that sponsor the most immigrants on the H1, I believe it's the H1 visa
Yeah.
for immigrants. And so he's just hurting corporations like H1. I mean,
Well, my friend, is not just hurting corporations, it's hurting the American economy and it's hurting all of us
H1B visa, yeah.
when you think about the folks who pick our produce, those who do works that people don't want to do. And yes, it's now more than ever, there's a technical folks. And I know that's one of the reasons why the technology industry in Silicon Valley were natural allies to the immigrants and to the dreamers because their workforce is impacted because they want to bring more um, folks, engineers from China, from India, from other places where they have, oh, really all over the world who have developed their computing and other valuable skills that ironically the US has not wanted to develop and help provide for a lump for students of color and sort of build our own talent. But anyways, I digress. So I think ultimately not having immigrants, not having their work, not having their taxes, not having their cultural contributions, not having their families, not having their spending is not good for the country.
Yeah, I was trying to get a breakdown of the uh, the industries that those with H1B visas go to. So in this one saying 37% of H1B visa holders work at these top 20 companies. He's affecting the high skilled labor. I know you also mentioned like farm workers, the seasonal workers that come in on temporary visas.
There's a whole number of a whole set for farm workers.
Yeah, so I have to see what he's doing because I'd have to read a little bit more into the actual reduction that has come about while Trump has been here. Because I have heard from some of my coworkers that the visa process is a lot harder for them, but these are engineers. These aren't
Mhm.
farm workers. So he's making it harder for these high skilled professionals to get visas to come to the U.S., which ultimately, right, like we said, hurts companies. But look, Trump doesn't. Yeah, I think yeah, the guy is a by default. I think because of his upbringing, because of how he feels, how he thinks, the guy is a racist. You can say that because there's plenty, and he's a misogynist also. But the guy is also a capitalist, and
Mhm.
if he needed to, if he was running a company that needed cheap labor. He would be all for bringing in
Which he did
right, exactly.
in his hotels.
Yeah. So he's all for bringing in immigrants from other countries. So he's not like capitalism trumps his racism any day of the week. For example, when they started desegregating the sports leagues, well, that was because they realized that there was so much talent in the African American community that they were missing out on, and they wanted to tap into it. So capitalism trumped whatever racist segregation laws we had at the time. Same thing with Trump. And the guy just does what he wants to do, what he needs to do to try to get elected. So a lot of the policies that he's passing, it's because of the base, the support that he has, because he wants to make sure that he gets that support. But again, I don't think that guy doesn't believe in anything. His ideology is to money and to himself and to capitalism. So that's what I was saying earlier, that he may just make a calculated move to say that he already did enough to get the support of those that support him. So, but anyway, we'll see. That's just me speculating.
Well, yeah, it's good. And can we stipulate a little further? So, worst case scenario for many people out there, Trump wins re-election. So you think he'll be better on immigration than some of the other issues because he proved a point that he can win, and now he's just going to be focused on helping himself, his friends, and doing the right thing for business, like maybe do an immigration reform or doing something like that.
It's hard to say because he won't have to worry about a re-election. And so he won't, all the people that voted for him, he'll just swindle them. I mean, look, the guy would not lose any sleep swindling all the people that voted for him, and then all of a sudden turning around in the last 4 years of his administration and trying to do something grandiose to leave a legacy behind because it stroked his ego. I mean, the guy would probably even like pass reparations to African Americans just to say that he's the guy that did it.
He's the one that did it.
Yeah, he would probably push for. Look, immigration reform is not even up to the president. We tried immigration reform in the DREAM Act, and Congress couldn't pass it. The closest they came was it 2003 when they were 5 votes shy of passing it.
I was actually in the Senate when that vote occurred.
So it was Congress. It wasn't even the president. So I don't know what he would try, but the guy would probably try to do something to leave some type of mark. And he doesn't care. He doesn't have an idea. He has some ideology, but not really. Like he could pass reparations. He could try to pass immigration reform. He could try to pass something big just to leave a legacy if he doesn't care anymore about the votes. Mm-hmm. I mean, remember, Trump has a lot of liberal policies even before he started running as a Republican. And so, I mean, he approved this like 4 trillion or 5 trillion package that we gave during the start of the coronavirus. That's not a Republican policy. I mean, Republicans are supposed to be fiscally conservative. And here you have Trump approving this massive bailout. That's supposed to be what liberals do.
Good point.
Let's go through some tweets because I always go to Twitter to get the reaction. Let's see what this guy gave Ortiz. My therapist just emailed me to tell me he was thinking about me and the DACA decision, and now I'm sobbing again. That's a good one. I know Woman is gonna try to ruin this because he's insecure. So this one is 4. I'm trying to get the broad picture of for and against, because I know when this passed, I was seeing a lot of negative posts or people that were not happy with this. Yeah, I think what we really need is a permanent solution, but
it's not going to happen before the elections, that's for sure. So the only time, probably shortly after the next president gets picked, whether it's a Trump re-election or a Biden administration, that first term, the first 2 years is really when you have the window to get as many things done before the midterm elections and things get complicated again politically or change.
Yeah. It looks like the sentiment overall, at least in this particular surge, is that it is positive, but there's a lot of people out there that are not happy with this decision because I mean, we've done this before, right? They somehow want to project all of the problems of this country onto the small group of people in this category, which is it's very small. Do you know how many dreamers? It's not even a million, right? That this DACA
No, it's
program
like
affects
less
it.
than a million. And that's the
Yeah,
thing, like these are like the cream of the crop, right? They're the ones that came here as young people
yeah, no
who
criminal
have
record.
committed. Yeah. And yeah, to your point, I know that the governor DeSantis from Florida tried to blame the spike in COVID infections to Mexican migrant workers in Florida.
Hmm.
La osadía. You have all these people like protesting, trying to open the beaches and all that stuff, and you're gonna blame the poorest and the folks who are picking your fruit and your food. That's just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought I was gonna get more tweets on DACA people speaking out against it. I suppose it's a good thing, but it's already been a few days after this passed. But there was definitely some arguments made against it, that it's gonna encourage more immigration if they do this. That it amounts to amnesty. Didn't Ted Cruz come out and give a long talk on this? Let's see what this guy said.
Yeah, and I mean, it's good that it encourages more immigration. I mean,
Here it
immigration
is.
has been overall positive for the U.S. And again, it's just you need to have a better system in place, a system that acknowledges that you need people to work your fields, do other jobs, and also provides the certainty that both people and businesses need to do their what they want to do, live their lives.
Yeah, let me pull up this one from Ted Cruz. At least we're gonna. Oh, is he gonna play? Let's see what he says.
What's up with his tie, with his
This
shirt?
case concerned President Obama's executive amnesty. Amnesty that President Obama decreed directly contrary to federal law. He did so with no legal authority.
By the way, how many of executive actions did Bush take, right? And they weren't complaining when he was doing it.
Yeah, I mean they complained, and then why did Obama have to take executive action? Because they wouldn't work with him, they wouldn't address the issue.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think part of the reason, one of the arguments that didn't work this time around was because they were saying that Obama didn't have the authority to do this, but then he's claiming other authority to do other things, like take away the money from other parts of the budget to build the wall. So
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
like that's the thing about presidential power. Like you gotta, it goes both ways.
Yeah, and they thrive on people having a short memory to not be able to hold them accountable for their inconsistent record.
Yeah,
See, I can't stand much of this guy, so I'll just play him for like another minute.
you don't have to play him at all
He
if you don't
did
want to.
so in
Yeah. We already know what he's going to say. The thing with the DACA recipients is that, again, it's under a million. I think I had read about 700 or 800,000 of them. They're the best representatives within the immigrant community,
Hmm.
in terms of academics, in terms of no criminal record, working, paying taxes. And on top of that, look, they were brought to this country by their parents as kids. So they didn't even have a say in that.
Hmm.
So if you're somebody if you find yourself upset about that somehow we need a way to help them, then I think that people just need to try to take a step back and rethink that through. First of all, it helps the country to have these individuals come out of the shadows and be productive members of society, and then also, again, proportion, right? It's so few of them, and the one of the common arguments that I've heard against this is to say, well, we have a ton of Americans that are hurting. We need to take care of our own Americans first before we take care of these immigrants. And so I'd say to that, well, yeah, take care of the Americans too. There's plenty of money. There's plenty of wealth in
Hmm.
this country. Look at how much money they just gave to the top companies as part of this bailout for COVID. Like literally trillions of dollars. Look at how much money we're squandering in foreign wars. There's plenty of money to help everyone else here. It's just they don't want to do it. It's not like the money that's going to help these immigrants kids is drying up the entire coffers, and then the country doesn't have any more money to help others. It doesn't work that way. They willfully choose policies that don't help regular Americans with healthcare and with other and in other areas.
Hmm. That's very true, and I think the messed up part is that immigrants, regardless of their ability to make money, contribute to the country. So it's almost unfair that you have to like really like filter to this group of immigrants in order to make it help people understand why these are so good for their country. But obviously their parents are, their uncles are, their brothers and sisters are, even if they mess up, like even if they make a mistake, they don't have to be perfect. Just like every American doesn't have to be perfect and go to college or serve in the military and do all these things. So I think it's also being able to point that out, that all immigrants deserve a fair shot, and they're worthy just because of their humanity, not just because of what they contribute, which they already contribute just by being here.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, I think it was a good week. I'm glad that this happened. Again, it's good in a way because the good thing about it is that it's essentially just putting a temporary stop to something that Trump tried to do, but it's still a temporary thing. They're still in limbo. They're still not a permanent solution. And I hope that as our ability to flex our political muscle increases in this country, that we can actually have comprehensive immigration reform. And that's why we need people like ourselves to be more engaged, people to speak up, to try to organize, to try to encourage others to also be more vocal about these things. As the influence in our community grows, I'm hoping that eventually this will pass. So that's why it's important for everyone else out there to do their part in whatever way that they can.
Very, very true. A great call to action.
Yeah.
All right. As always, thank you so much for listening to us. Follow us on the Brown Perspective Now on Instagram. Like us, let us know how we did. Also, like our YouTube channel, Brown Perspective, and we look forward to continuing to have these interesting conversations.
Give me a second.
There it is.
There it is.
Which is good because now it opens us up. We can potentially in the near future do a TV channel called The Brown Perspective.
We're going to be a little bit more active going forward with our tweets, but so far we've only had replies and tweets to some other conversations. But yeah, this is our handle for anyone that wants to drop us a message.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you.